Okay, my loves, we are back. Take a deep breath. Take one whole deep breath. Breathe in, breathe out. Arrive from wherever you are, wherever you have been, whatever is going on with you. I'm trying to invite, let's see, that should be easier than it is. There we go. Welcome. Take a deep breath, settle in. Thank you for your patience. We are on day 2 of Unleashing Your Story. This session is all about finding your voice, and finding your voice is largely, in my interpretation, about clearing obstacles. We talked about obstacles a bit yesterday, and today we're really going to dive in even deeper. So, one of the things that I have been already hearing some feedback on is when you sign up for a mini writer's workshop, you think, oh, I'm going to be writing. However, in this week's session of Unleashing Your Story, we are actually doing all of the pre-work, all of the background work, so that at the end of this week, your story is ready, that you have really cleared the decks. I want to tell you quickly, the first time I sat down and set out to write a book was 2005. I had lost my job, I had some time, and I had a story to tell. And I sat down every morning and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. Um, and I did all the things that thought I was supposed to in terms of just producing every day. But I got to a point where I hit a wall. And I kid you not, that half manuscript still to this day sits, I think, word for word, exactly as it was when I hit the wall in 2006. And it never got the attention that it needed to fully come to life. And so the work that we're doing in these days, the Unleashing Your Story work, is really clearing the blocks, and certainly not, no, let me take that back. I think that's a false statement. When you clear one block, there's going to be another. I'm on the phone all the time with women who are interested in writing their books and writing their stories. And every single phone call, someone will say, I'm afraid that, or my deepest fear is. Okay. And there's something, and it's completely valid, and it's always different. But every time somebody gets close to something like sharing their story or finding their voice, of course there's a fear. And I don't want you to think that if we do this work well this week, then all your blocks will be cleared and no obstacles will come around. That is not the case, nor should it be. As you already know, I am the mistress, the champion of obstacles. I love, appreciate, and respect obstacles. They are challenges, and this is a hard one, I used to hate them. I used to resist them. I used to begrudge them and do everything I could in my damn power to avoid a single obstacle. I did not learn and I did not grow that way, but I poured tons of energy into avoiding my obstacles. Now, after years later, I'm a little bit wiser, I hope, and I believe, hi, Elizabeth, you are my champion. Thank you for being here. I believe that obstacles and challenges are what we need in order to become, like, we need those things in order to become whoever we're becoming. When we do not face our obstacles, look them square in the eye and say, hey there, who are you? Where did you come from? Then we're letting them win. And your blocks will win, your fears will win if you don't address them. And so that's part of what we're going to play with today. So take a deep breath. Maybe it has not, up until now, been your thing to look closely at your obstacles. Today, I want to talk you through a couple of strategies, because there will be ones that show up tonight and tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And this is what I say when I'm on calls with clients is like, you've got this fear now. And as soon as we navigate this fear, there's going to be another one. And that doesn't mean that you did anything wrong, and that doesn't mean that there's a place where you should get to, where there are no fears. I don't believe in that place. When you're coming up against fear after fear after fear, to me, that says you're doing something really important. When your fear center is triggered, it means part of you is alert to your growing and is really sensitive to being uncomfortable and being out of a familiar space. This morning I posted a poll. A couple of you responded, and I deeply appreciate that. What are your sort of top obstacles? And they were about doubt. Can I do this? I don't know how to, don't know where to start. Fear. What happens if I share? What happens when I say this? Logistics, totally fine and fair. I don't have a lot of time. I don't have a lot of money. I don't know how to start. I don't know where to start. Good morning, Bridget. Welcome from tomorrow in Australia. I'm so glad you're here. Yeah, facing fear is the opportunity to grow. It sounds good in a Facebook comment, and it is completely true. But when we're in the thick of it, it still feels totally terrifying and overwhelming. But when you can really repeat what Bridget wrote, facing the fear is the opportunity to grow. When you know that and you're in the fear, but you have that context of, oh, this is me growing. This terror is not something that I should run from. I should just sit with it and learn from it. We can get there. It is possible. So our major obstacles have to do with fear, doubt, logistics, shame. And I didn't put it on the poll, but I want to name actually also hope. For me, my hopes of being a writer, my hopes of being published, my hopes of reaching and impacting lots of people was as much of an obstacle as my fear and my doubt. Those two things, those two emotions really worked well to keep me stuck for a super long time. If you haven't already said hi in the comments, drop a hello. If you're watching the replay, give me a hashtag replay. Where are you in the world? Were you in yesterday's session? Just go ahead, open up, share. How do you feel about your obstacles? You do not have to like them. You do not have to say, oh, welcome obstacles, come to the party. But that is what we're gonna do today. So there's so many obstacles, but obstacles serve, and this is what we're going to do. They do serve to, they're serving you. They're serving to keep you safe and keep you in a familiar space. Okay. And so when we can both look at them as obstacles help us grow, they're also intended, I mean, they're created to keep you safe. And so you can look at the obstacle and say, I recognize that you're trying to keep me from this new, foreign, unknown space over there. Great, cool, thanks, but I don't need you. Then you can also work through it. So here's the first step. You have your workbook in front of you. One of the things to do to change an obstacle really is to identify it. Obstacles have a lot of power when we resist them, when we sort of hide from them. They show up and we're like, oh, no, no thanks. And then we stay over here and the obstacle stays over here. What we're going to do first thing in the workbook is to really name as explicitly as you can the feelings, the hopes, the fears, the doubts, the logistics, all of the obstacles that currently, or if you were in yesterday's session, up until now have prevented you from making the progress in your writing and voicing and sharing your story that you want. Okay? You can do it in your workbook. Of course, as always, I love to hear from you. It gives us some richness to hear multitudes of voices in the comments. So if you want to do that, go for it. Okay. Yeah, Bridget's in the fear, and it's a really powerful thing to name and experience. Thank you for owning that. So what are, as explicitly as you can, when I realized that my hopes were as paralyzing as my fears, that was a really interesting moment and sort of shifted things for me. You're going to make your list of all the obstacles because you can't change them, you can't understand them, you can't see what they have to teach you until you name them. Okay? We've said it, obstacles are here to challenge you, to force you to grow, and to make you into some way that you haven't been in the past. If you don't know the obstacle that you are facing, again, I'm very visual. I have this sort of like frog on glass mirror, sort of like a smack. That's how I feel when I run into an obstacle that I don't understand, and you're just stuck. When you can peel yourself off and look at the obstacle and say, all right, well, what do I need to do to it? Do I need to go around it, over it? Do I need to break it? Do I need to, what is the obstacle? Why is it here? And how do I get around it? Is actually a really fundamental component for how we go forward. And the reason I'm spending a whole session on it in this 5-day training is because there's always going to be another obstacle. Always. Okay. The people you're looking up to and aspiring to be, they have obstacles in front of them. They're not your obstacles. You wish you had their obstacles. You're not there yet, but there's always going to be an obstacle. There are people who are looking at you and saying, oh my gosh, I wish I were her. Okay. There's always going to be another obstacle. So we're not trying to get rid of our obstacles. We just need a strategy and a process by which to navigate and not let our obstacles be the end of the story. Okay. We're not going to let our obstacles, our hopes, our fears, our doubts, the logistics, we're not going to let, I don't have a lot of time, be the thing that prevents you from writing a book. We're not going to let it happen anymore. But you have to name it before we can change it. So you're going to name it. Once you've got sort of a massive brain dump of these are my obstacles, yay, look at them all. I want you to divide them. I mentioned this a little bit yesterday, but I want you to color code, make 2 lists again, however you want to do it. But there's the practical, we're not calling them realistic and unrealistic. We're talking about the practical, sort of logistical, tangible, masculine, if you will, obstacles, time, money, I don't have the right writing program, that practical stuff. I don't know where to save my files. I don't know how to organize. I don't know where to start my writing project. Those are practical obstacles. And then there's perceived obstacles, which are the hopes and the fears, the more emotional, and we will call them the more feminine, the sensuous feelings about what's holding you back. Notice if you have a whole bunch of practical ones and not a lot of perceived ones or emotional ones, or vice versa, okay? Or some of each. It's good to have a nice smattering of obstacles. Because the reason we divide them this way is because we definitely need to learn and grow from all of our obstacles, but how we address a perceived obstacle is going to be different than how we address a practical obstacle. A practical obstacle needs a practical approach, and a perceived obstacle requires some sensing, some feeling, and some shifting around that. I want to share with you tonight a practice that I do with my one-on-one clients when we encounter a feeling we don't know what to do with. And I'm sharing this here because this is a process that you can use with your obstacles. And I think it's fun, but that's because I like what I do. Last night was a tea night. Tonight's a wine night. And if it's early morning for you, salud. So here's the exercise, real quick. You won't do it now because it requires a little bit of time. And I wrote a blog and then did an audio, I think, process. It's about a 15-minute process that you can listen to. I'll try to find it and drop the link in the comments, whereby you're doing this step-by-step process and I'm walking you through it. Basically, for each of your obstacles, choose one. You don't have to take on the whole world all at once. Choose one obstacle that you feel like, okay, I want to get to know this obstacle to help me learn and overcome or navigate this obstacle. So choose one, and we are going to personify it. Maybe it's a doubt or a fear, or it's anger or judgment, whatever. You are going to close your eyes. You're going to take a deep breath. And don't worry, I'll walk you through this slowly in the practice. You're going to get a sense of, I want you to be able to see third person this emotion, this obstacle. Is it an animal, a vegetable, a mineral? What shape is it? What color is it? How old is it? What name is it? What mood is it in? Okay. When you can see that or draw that, also then with your eyes closed, what's it called? Does it have a name? Is it Ralph? Is it Mildred? Is it Hogarth? What's the name of this entity? Because you are going to start talking to it. You are going to begin to communicate and say, hey there, I noticed that you're wanting some attention. What's going on? How can I help you? Oh, you're frustrated. Oh, you haven't been felt, and you start listening to the emotion, or listening to the obstacle. Why is the obstacle there? Is it trying to keep you safe? Is it trying to protect you? Is it not wanting to let you be embarrassed? And then you can be like, oh, I see you. I understand where you're coming from. Thank you so much for your help. Maybe I don't need it. So this is a process where you close your eyes, you envision, you name it, you can draw it out if that's your thing, but then you have a conversation with the actual obstacle to understand, because it's come from you, even your logistics, your lack of time, the lack of money, whatever the obstacle is you, okay? And that is a loving thing to say because you are the only one who can change your circumstance. You're the only one who can shift the energy and shift those obstacles. We wish other people could do it for us, but in fact, we can't. We are the only ones who can do that for us. So the next part of your workbook is, again, let's not try to solve all of our obstacles all at once. Choose one, deconstruct it, get to know it, and then what needs to shift in your belief structure. What beliefs do you have? Oh, I can never write a book because I'm dyslexic. Oh, I'll never write a book because whatever, English isn't my first language and I want to publish in English. Or I'll never write a book because I don't have time and I'm a single mom and it's a quarantine and there's a pandemic, and or no one will ever buy my book. Whatever beliefs and stories you have are sort of another layer on top of the deeper fears. What are the stories and beliefs you have been telling yourself that allow for your obstacles to stay where they are, that prevent you from sort of poking underneath and being like, what actually is underneath there? What are those beliefs and stories? Because those are really important for you to understand. They hold us back until we can see them for what they are. And, your heart of hearts or your rational mind will be like, that belief is BS. And I know it here. And so now let me untangle it sort of in my neurological or genetic code. And it's true, like epigenetics is a thing. If you've been on any one of my trainings, I can go mystical woo woo as well as like neuroscience and epigenetics, which is how you can activate or deactivate certain aspects of your DNA through experience. And like your grandmother's trauma can be living in your DNA, which also means you're living out other people's older stories. And when we go into like matrilineal healing, you can heal your genetic line forwards and backwards by doing some of this work. Okay? Anybody with me? Does that sound like amazingness or total craziness? I'm catching up on some comments. They're just coming through slow on my end. So not only does this sort of obstacle wrestling serve you, it's going to serve the story that you have to tell. It's going to serve the audience that's dying to hear from you, whether they know it or not. And it can even serve your grandmother and your great, 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 great. It's awesome. Epigenetics and sort of like the holographic universe, when one woman can do this healing and like learn how to relate to her obstacles, the ripple effects, both, socially and emotionally. But if you talk like on a quantum level, I'm getting a really geeky sciencey tonight. Apologies. The the holographic universe says like if one person can shift one thing in herself, then it affects everybody. And then there's the tipping point, Malcolm Gladwell's, everything. So when enough of us are doing this work for ourselves, it's going to have more impact. It's not just this selfish stuff, yada, yada. Okay, so we've named our obstacles quite literally. We've sorted them into our practical ones and our perceived ones. If you have questions about where to do, yeah, no apologies, thank you, right? We're here, no more apologizing. And I love that you love it because I super geek out too. And those of us who are here are on the right page because this is our thing. All right, so you have sorted your obstacles into our practical and our perceived. If you are still seeking some support of like, how do I address these things differently, drop a comment now or later, and I'll get into it more in detail. But what I want to leave you with is a couple of antidotes. I really think of them as things in tiny little flasks and tinctures that support your resilience and your like, yeah, you're just inner glow when it comes to writer's block, which is just a name of any of these obstacles, sort of frying your system and preventing you from the next step. There's always just the next step. And when the next step feels really big, then that you're already there. You've let the obstacles and the stories get the better of you because all you need is what's the one next step. And comes down to really usually very practical stuff until what we need to do is like actually the next step is to clear that emotional block. So we can do that. Some of the antidotes that I have come up with is just I'm really competitive, but on the down low, right? I'm so competitive that I usually don't play. That use up until now, okay. But when it came to sports in school, I was so competitive. I was like, oh yeah, no, I'm not playing. So when it comes to thinking about our blocks, this competitive spirit of mine really helps. Like the block wins when, or the block wins if it stops you from doing the next thing. And I'm so competitive. I'm like, oh, block, I see you. You're going down. We're going to become friends, but then you're going down and we're going to go on this journey together. And this next step, you're going to be holding my hand or you're going to be, you know, you got my back there. My doubt, my fear, all of my like things that I used to be going like this against. Once I did that practice and really got to know them, I was like, oh, I see you. Oh, I get it. Come, join me. And now there's I did this exercise with all of my like most least desirable parts, my fear, my judgment, my doubt, my, body image. Ooh, that was a good one. I did this exercise in a series of days. And then one day I was walking down the street. I know exactly where I was and I know where the light was because I was like, wait a minute. I am not fighting the world anymore. I'm not fighting myself in the world. I feel like a goddamn superhero walking down the street in slow motion. I've got my cape waving in the background because I've got fear over here. I've got judgment over here. I've got like anger who will totally smack down anybody who crosses a boundary. I have got like some self-loathing over here that sort of like fuels my fire. I have got all of these like my posse. It's like my team. So what used to be my obstacles were transformed. I still wrestle a little bit, but I now have open channels of communication with them. And so through that, I was like, I'm not going to let these things win, but I can convert them to my team. And so that's a really powerful one. So your block wins if you let it stop you. But if you get to know it, it can become your greatest ally. Another shift that's been really important and has helped a lot of women that I've been working with is when we get stuck, a lot of the doubts and the fears are about, we get wrapped up with me and my story. Okay, it's a relationship between me and my story, and maybe like, am I ready to tell it, or how do I do it, or blah 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 blah. There's just all of that me and my story, which is just, it's an important phase, but it's also very much like looking at your belly button. So the shift and the antidote here is it's not about you and your story. When you can, if that resonates with you and you feel like, oh, I get stuck there a lot, I want you to play with this idea about your story and who needs to hear it. I really want you to sit with that and focus on who are those people and ask the question, what will they know? What will they be? And what will they do as a result of what you've shared with them? And when you really play with and soak in, it's your story and who that's going to serve and how it's going to change their lives. For me and a lot of the women that I've worked with, that all of a sudden becomes real fuel to move through the obstacles, to write the story. You're like, oh, well, I've got to do this for so and so, especially women who love to look after one another. Um, it can motivate us to get through some of those obstacles. Remembering that you are learning through obstacles and the challenges. Yes, yes, yes. One thing feels really true is that everything is impossible until you try. It's impossible. If you're not trying, it will be and is and will remain impossible. But as soon as you try, then anything's possible. And again, that's just sort of like a psychological thing, but I wanted to add it. And the last detail, the last practice, maybe you heard, every day in April, I recommitted to the morning pages practice, which is something I picked up from Julia Cameron and The Artist's Way. Excellent book. It's famous throughout time because it's good. Morning pages is one of those practices. I'm not going to go too much into depth about it today. I might share a little bit more about it tomorrow, but I've also shared a lot about the morning pages. But the reason I bring it up here as an antidote to the obstacles is because morning pages is 3 pages, handwritten, stream of consciousness, whatever's on the top of your head. And it's clearing the clutter. But it's also a practice of self-awareness. When you actually have to acknowledge what you're thinking to yourself by writing it down, you're like, oh, that's the thought that's in my head, really? But it's, for me, I wrote down just this note. It's like the morning pages is me wrestling with my doubts and my fears. And by doing that, I'm observing them, I'm getting to know them. And when I do that, they no longer have the power that they had when I was just so afraid of them that I just put up a block and stopped. Okay. So instead of avoiding the thing, whatever it was, I write my pages on it, and I don't even have to. It just comes up. It's like the what if parts of the story, they'll never love me again. That stuff comes up in pages, and then I can look at it plain as day in terrible handwriting because I just write really fast. Plain as day, I can look at the doubt, the fear, that story, that belief, whatever the thing is, I can look at it and say, oh, okay, this is a perceived obstacle. It's not real. And I can shift that energy and I can shift the relationship with it. So we've just blazed through. We're already almost at 30 minutes. I just want to reiterate that there will always be obstacles. And thank goodness, because every obstacle is your next growing edge. And your growing edge is full of potential. Okay? It is not something to be avoided. It's not something to be feared. And it is something that with time and with practice, you can grow familiar with, maybe never comfortable with. You may always be uncomfortable on that growing edge. But when you are familiar with discomfort, then what we were talking about at the very beginning is you can recognize, oh, the terror that I'm experiencing is normal, it's healthy, but it's not life-threatening fear. It's just my growing edge terror. Because the reality is, and we usually don't share this, and so we don't know, the first book that I wrote, they're both right here, Subtle, How Change Really Happens, and Date Yourself. The first book I put out, I remember going through this whole emotional upheaval of, the creation process, and people are going to see it, and is it going to do well, and the judging, and all of that was happening sort of all at once. Plus the logistics of actually just getting the book out was really overwhelming. And then 6 months later, I did it again with another book, and it wasn't any less, but it was a little bit more familiar. And so it was, oh, right, this is the part where, oh, right, this is the part where I feel like I'm going to vomit for a couple of hours. Oh, right, this is the part where I, come down off of that high of somebody left a review, or this is where, and so just being familiar with the discomfort of the obstacles is, for me, that's my goal. just to be familiar, because I was on a call this morning and we were talking about, you know, trying to figure out how to do it right before we actually do it. And that is not how humans learn. It is often how women try. We try to figure it all out in our heads before we act. But I promise you this, when you are doing the thing, then you're learning. Okay. So write the thing, face the obstacle, um, draft a piece, make a mess, whatever the thing is, because what you do after that is where you're going to be learning. But you're not going to do that learning sitting at home before you do the thing, contemplating the thing. That's what the doubt and the fear and the obstacles actually want, is for you to just stay right here in the familiar because it's safe. But what you want to do, because you spent all yesterday looking at your why and really feeling it in your body, what you want to do, and I've spent the years supporting women around fulfillment. We are fulfilled when we are out here growing terrified. That is fulfilling. Striving, stretching, reaching for something that's just beyond our grasp, that in itself is fulfilling. It's not the reaching and the getting. Actually, I mean, the getting is nice, but there's a whole other psychological process. Once we get it, we're like, oh yeah, that, no big deal. I wrote a book, sure, no big deal. Don't worry about it yet. It's the reaching. It's when you are stretching yourself and doing the thing, that's when you are most fulfilled. Okay, so this whole process is fulfilling in the terror. Elizabeth, you still with me? What are your thoughts? What's going on? What's coming up for you? And tomorrow, so yesterday was your why, today's obstacles. Tomorrow, we're going to get into really, really fueling you so that by the end of this week, you're going to have all the tools that you need, most of the tools, lots of tools, to really be ready to unleash your story. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Feeling this so much. I'm so glad. I love Facebook Lives, but sometimes I can't see anybody and I don't know what's happening on the other side of the world. There's been enough in this training today. I'm just going to leave it as is. I'm going to see you again tomorrow. As always, there's going to be next steps posted in the group, nudges, really encouraging you to push yourself a little bit further. Every time that you push yourself and you share, you're opening up the conversation for the other women in the group who are having similar processes and giving them permission to share and explore what's going on for them. Thank you for tuning in live, and thank you for watching the replay. Drop any questions, any further comments, anything that stirs for you in the next couple of days, drop it in the comments. This is a global conversation that we're having, and it's pretty a universal experience for those of us who are wanting to move into this writing and publishing space. So I'll see you tomorrow night, and I'll talk to you then. Mwah. Bye.